for true scary hotel horror stories. Story 1. I recently moved to a new city and have been looking for a job. I passed by a hotel near the coast and went in to see if they needed someone to work at the front desk. Inside, it was empty, dark, and had a stale smell. The man behind the counter had an extremely strong accent, and I had a hard time understanding him. It seemed like I was the only person in the entire building, and the place gave me a strange feeling, but I decided to stick around to complete the application and turn it in as quickly as possible. I could feel him looking at me all the time. The man muttered something under his breath and took my request. After I left, I decided that I probably wouldn't accept a position there due to the strangeness of the situation, and I really regretted leaving my phone number, address, and other personal information on the application. Later that night, I was at home watching the Olympics in my living room. Around 10 o'clock, I went to my bedroom to grab my phone from the charger and saw that I had a missed call from just a few minutes ago. It's rare for someone to call me so late, but I dialed the number to satisfy my curiosity. A woman with a heavy accent answered and demanded to know who was calling. I politely told him that I had missed a call from that number. He began to shout, "No, no, no, Samantha," at the top of his lungs, and hung up. I was scared that she used my name and her strange way of speaking, but I assumed she was some drug addict who dialed my number by mistake. I took my phone back into the living room and sat down. Just then, my phone started ringing again. I answered, and it was the man from the hotel, shouting my name over and over again. She was screaming at the top of her lungs, and she could hear the woman screaming as well. I could catch bits of what they were saying, but between their accents and both of them screaming, it was hard to understand everything. I heard things like, "You bother my phone, you bother your life. You can't see," and that was it. I hung up quickly and started panicking. They called me 14 times in about 20 minutes. Luckily, I don't have my voicemail set up, so they couldn't leave any messages. My husband came home around midnight, and I told him what had happened. He laughed and said they were probably high and just dialed my number to annoy me. I really hated the fact that those people had a fair amount of my personal information, but I thought they were too crazy to do anything other than make creepy calls at night. Finally, I calmed down enough to go to sleep around 3 in the morning. Half an hour later, I woke up to my dog barking, growling, and running to the back door. I knew right away that something was wrong, because she never acts like that and is well trained. My husband and I ran into the living room and saw a hand coming through the dog door, scratching at the tile floor. I screamed, and my husband grabbed me and we went into the bedroom, locking the door. I called the police, and luckily they arrived within 10 minutes. The man was already gone, but he knew exactly who he was. I gave my statement and showed them my call log from that night. They called the number, but it was a prepaid phone, so they couldn't easily track it down. By the time the police left, it was around 5:30 in the morning, which was fine with me because I wasn't going to be able to sleep anyway. A few hours later, my husband, who was still really angry, and I decided to go to the hotel to try to get information about the man and inform the staff that this guy was crazy. We spoke to the manager, and he told us that the man I described had been fired a year ago for harassing a waitress. Oh, my God. So what was he doing in the lobby last week? They checked the security cameras and found that he was constantly around the hotel and looking out the windows. I guess he snuck in as the manager left the counter, just as I walked in. The manager contacted the police and was able to file trespassing charges against him. Now, at least, the police are looking for him. At this point, I'm crying. I had given my personal information to a crazy person who was harassing me. I still get calls from strange numbers overnight, but luckily he hasn't been back to the house, at least as far as I know. I reached out to my references that I used on the application to let them know what was going on. Apparently, my former boss received a voicemail around 2 a.m. on Monday, with sounds of heavy breathing and some strange moaning noises. This last week I haven't been able to sleep at all. I'm a nervous wreck and jump every time my phone rings or I hear my dog barking. Story 2. My next-door neighbor's parents moved from India to the UK in the 60s. After retiring, they took up the habit of returning to India every year to visit family and friends, ultimately spending about half of their time traveling around India and the other half here. In short, one year they invited my family to accompany them. I was 15, now I'm 25, and back then I thought I was a hardcore Viking rocker prince because I had long blonde hair. Fun fact, curly hair ruins everything. Now I look like a cherub. My neighbor's father had planned this vacation as if it were a military campaign. When we arrived, he handed each of us, including my 11-year-old brother and sister, a brown folder containing our itinerary, hotel brochures, currency conversion tables, train schedules, for passport photos of us for forms, and a list of names under the heading Useful People. Forget the Viking rocker prince. I'm James Bond now. Aside from the fact that I was mistaken for a girl on several occasions. My favorite was when one of my neighbor's relatives asked my mom why she let me dress like a boy and offered to order a custom-made sari from me. I had an amazing time until we arrived at a huge hotel in the middle of the jungle. Honestly, in the arsenal out of nowhere. The nearest town was a 3-hour drive down a dirt road, just before sunset in the jungle. I pull out the brochure, and it would be safe to say that this place is under new management. There is only one light on, like on the 5th floor. As we enter the driveway, we see a group of men gathered around a large campfire. One of them stands up and starts screaming something, but the man next to him silences him with a slap on the back of the head. One of the group walks slowly over and beckons our driver to roll down the window. Imagine Alfred Hitchcock as an Indian drug dealer, and you'll get a good idea of the man who is now poking his hanging cheeks out of our window. He looks to the back, sees us, and shows the dictionary definition of a crap-eating smile. In broken English, he welcomes us to the hotel, reviews our reservations and guides us to the lobby. That's when things get really weird. The place is deserted. It's not that the staff went to sleep. Deserted as if those who were there had left in a hurry. There are sagging chairs in the lobby. Hitchcock tells us that our rooms are not ready yet. It was already 9 o'clock at night, and offers us some food while we wait. The dining room is huge, empty, and a boy who would not have been more than 9 years old takes our order and quickly disappears, closing the doors behind him. We hear a motorcycle engine outside, and an hour later something vaguely resembling our order appears, served on a variety of mismatched tableware. I have no idea where all that came from. At this point, we're all pretty nervous, and we start making silly jokes to ease the tension. We would only be there for one night. Everything was paid for in advance, and we were a large group, 11 in total, with 2 people who spoke Hindi and Konkani, so I was pretty confident that we could handle any oddities. Hitchcock staggers in and leads us to our rooms. Each of them is completely stripped down, except for the beds and bedside tables. There are exposed wires sticking out of the walls where you'd expect a TV or phone. And there are rectangles of faded wallpaper that suggest someone has finally taken a stand against terrible hotel art. The only decoration is a small, creepy metal horse sitting on one of the bedside tables. I'm sharing a room with my little brother and insist on taking the bed closest to the door, presumably thinking I could summon Thor if things got ugly. Hitchcock stands in the doorway for a while, baring his pearly brown teeth and giving me a creepy look. I slam the door in his face. We leave our bags, check that the door is closed and talk until we fall asleep. I wake up not knowing what time it is. Clearly the clocks didn't fit the cracked, minimalist aesthetic that management was looking for, but it's pitch black. I hear my bedroom door closing. The door that's less than a foot from my head. Oh, God, I think. I'm not a Viking rocker prince. I'm a flying baby who plays the harp. I hide under the surprisingly clean blankets until my heart stops threatening to come out of my ribs and redecorate the ceiling. I do a stealthy ninja maneuver to get out of bed and go to the door. He is uninsured. Oh, God. I lock it with the bedside table, check that my little brother is alive, get into bed, see our suitcases and, after checking the jam, I notice that mine is open. Now, an unexpected twist. Nothing is missing. Camera, wallet, super secret spy dossier, it's all intact. I convince myself that I was scared by nothing and go back to sleep. Side note, my little brother slept the whole time. Morning comes, and we all want to get out of there as soon as possible. My neighbor's father gets angry at the strangeness of it all and manages to get half of our money back. Excellent. We go outside, and my sister points to the charred remains of one of the hotel beds that now make up what remains of the bonfire. Excellent. It turns out that our driver, who had a room in the place, decided to sleep on the bus because, in his own words, he didn't want his business weird. Apparently, there were people coming and going all night. He woke up and saw a guy's nose against the window, staring at him. The driver banged on the window, and the guy ran off into the jungle like Mowgli. We give a big tip to the driver. Hitchcock greets us from the lobby, adjusts his crotch and goes back inside. We leave thinking that the weird is over. An hour later, I decide to check our itinerary, so I pull out my spy folder. My heart sinks instantly. One of my passport photos is missing. A perfect rectangle of 35 by 45 millimeters has disappeared from the corner. 3 little Viking rocker cherubs look at me, mourning their fallen brother. I look in the folder, ask my parents if they took it for something, and I start to lose my cool. Everything from the night before comes back at once. I explain what happened, and there's a strange moment of silence as everyone looks at each other. It turns out that everyone had heard someone outside at the door at some point during the night, but they had locked it up before sleeping. My brother and I didn't have a lock. Hitchcock put us in that room on purpose. The driver suggests that we go back to the hotel and demand explanations. More tips for the driver. We arrived at the hotel. The doors are locked. Hitchcock and his henchmen have disappeared. The final touch of this cake. The horse, the small metal horse that was on our bedside table, had been placed on the step in front of the door. I took it. Free souvenir. Screw you, Hitchcock. In short, don't go to India. Story 3. When I was about 16 years old, I went on a trip to Cabo San Lucas with my family and best friend. My friend and I had a hotel room to ourselves during the trip, which naturally excited me. One afternoon, I was getting into the elevator and a security guard came in with me. As the elevator went up, he looked at me and said, "Excuse me, you were wearing a green skirt on the beach the other day?" Yes. Why? Answered. I was already instinctively uncomfortable mentioning the miniskirt I'd worn a few days before. "Oh, nothing, I just liked it a lot." When I got out of the elevator, he came out on the same floor and walked down the hallway while I pulled out my card to open my bedroom door. At 4 o'clock in the morning that same night, I woke up with a start only to realize that there was a man standing, silently, at the foot of my bed. It was a man in the uniform of a security guard, the same one from the elevator. When he saw me wake up, he mumbled something about my door not being properly closed and ran out of the room. I was still dazed by sleep and did not fully understand what had just happened. A moment after she ran away, I noticed she was lying on her back with the sheets around my ankles. I sleep naked, but I never wake up when I sleep, as I am always cold, and the air conditioning was at maximum. Also, I'm a sound sleeper, so someone just standing next to my bed wouldn't have woken me up. I'm pretty sure what woke me up was him taking off the sheets, which made me cold. It scares me to think about what might have happened if my friend hadn't been fast asleep in the other bed. Unfortunately, since I had already felt uncomfortable in the elevator and had avoided making eye contact or looking at his face, and because the room was so dark, I wouldn't have been able to identify him. I never bothered to report it to the hotel, something I still regret years later. Story 4. I work the night shift at a hotel, so I've seen a lot of weird guys pass by, but this is the most recent. It all started normally. Usually, once I start my shift at 11 o'clock at night, I can just sit at the desk and only see a few people. I'm a lonely person, and I prefer it to be that way. Around 2:30 a.m., a man in his 30s comes down and stands in front of me at the desk. I've worked at this job for 5 years, so I can identify weirdos pretty well, and I knew right away that something was wrong with him. At first he didn't say anything, he was just looking at me, so I asked him, "Can I help him?" He muttered something, and all I could understand was the word coffee. I told him that fresh coffee was available in the breakfast area behind him. He turned to look, then looked at me again, confused. "Do you have coffee that I can bring to my room?" My first thought was that this guy was drunk, so I told him that he could take a cup of the coffee that was already made and that I could give him a couple of envelopes to take to his room. I wanted the envelopes, so I grabbed a couple and gave them to him, hoping that was all he needed and that he could watch TV again. I wasn't so lucky. He stood in front of me, staring at the coffee packets with a confused face. I'd had enough of drunk guys, so I walked to the other side of the desk and started watching TV, ignoring him. After a few minutes, he made his way to the breakfast area and stared at the coffee makers. Then, he began to wander among the fruit, the cereal, the yogurt, and returned to the cafe, just looking at everything and walking in circles slowly. After a while, he stopped looking at the food and looked down at the ground, then began to mumble to himself as he walked in circles. Now I was officially getting scared. He was at least 6 inches taller than me, weighed about 23.5 kilos more, and I was the only person on duty. I started thinking about options to escape, like locking myself in the laundry room, running to the gas station next door, and so on. I'd already done that a few times when things got really bad, so I try to plan ahead when someone gives me bad vibes. 15 minutes after he started walking in circles, he made his way down the hall, still muttering. I relaxed, happy that she had gone to her room to sleep, and I would have the lobby to myself again. Probably 5 minutes later, I glanced out the front door, and there he was, staring at me, smoking a cigarette and still talking to himself. I started to think I was high or something, and that scared me enough to grab a pair of scissors when I wasn't looking and hold them next to me. I started thinking about calling the police, but for what? I hadn't done anything. So I decided to wait and hope that he would go to sleep soon, since it was past 3 in the morning at that time. For the next 30 minutes, he paced back and forth through the hallways, through the lobby and out, then re-entered through the back door and repeated the circuit. The third time he walked past me, still talking, I was terrified and about to say to hell and call 911 anyway, just to have someone else there with me. Just then, an old lady came up to the desk and asked me to call her a taxi. I had no idea how happy it made me to see her. I called the taxi and started talking to her, which was very unusual for me, just to keep her in the lobby. The weird guy appeared on the corner for the 4th time, and the old lady told him to pack up his things, that they were leaving because he had woken her up and couldn't go back to sleep. Apparently, this old lady was the weird guy's mother. I felt so much better knowing that they would be leaving as soon as the taxi arrived. As soon as she told him to pack his things, he got angry. He didn't want to leave. He told her to go back to bed, but she was insistent, and after they argued a bit, very awkward for me, just standing there watching, he went upstairs to pack. She explained that she could tell he was agitated and that it was time to take him home. I talked to her for a while, and she confessed that her son was schizophrenic and that she was the only one who took care of him. He told me that he just wanted someone to take him away for about 6 months, like a hospital, to give him his medication and put him in a good routine. I felt terrible for her. She seemed so tired and hopeless, and I have mental issues myself, so I could relate to her struggle. Suddenly, the weird guy ran out, insisting that he wanted to stay, and they argued again. But this time, he saw me watching and focused on me, approaching the desk shouting, "She's going to call the police. I didn't do anything. Are you going to clean my kitchen? Aren't you sucking me already?" And other horrible things while I stood there paralyzed. I raised my scissors to defend myself, and her mother cried out, "Stop it! Do you hear what you're saying?" And he calmed down as quickly as he had become upset. The taxi arrived, and as much as I pitied their mother, I was glad to see them go.